Hi, my name is Morgan Foley, and in this portion of the presentation, I will be explaining the DSM criteria for the diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Individuals with gender dysphoria have a marked incongruence between the gender they have been assigned to, which is referred as their natal gender, and their experienced or expressed gender. This incongruence is the core component of the diagnosis of gender dysphoria, as well as the component of distress about this incongruence. In the DSM-5, gender dysphoria is defined as a marked increments between one's experienced or expressed gender and assigned gender of at least 6 months duration. So because expression of gender dysphoria can vary with age, in the DSM-5 there are separate criteria sets for children versus adolescents and adults. So criteria of gender dysphoria starting with children. To appropriately diagnose children must have manifested at least 6 criterions. Criterion A1 states a strong desire to be of the other gender or an insistence that one is the other gender, or it could be some alternative gender different from one's assigned gender. So, for example, pre-pubertal natal girls with gender dysphoria may express the wish to be a boy. They may assert they're a boy, like boys' clothing and hairstyles over girls, and may even be asked to call a boy's name. Criterion A2 explains in boys a strong preference for cross-dressing or simulating female attire, and in girls a strong preference of wearing only typical masculine clothes and a resistance to wearing feminine clothing. So something like in a prepubertal natal girl will express an intense negative reaction, say if their parent attempts to have them wear dresses. Criterion A3 is the manifestation of a strong preference for cross-gender roles in make-believe play or fantasy play. Criterion A4 is the manifestation of a strong preference for the toys, games, or activities stereotypically used or engaged in by the other gender. Criterion A5 explains the manifestation of a strong preference to play with the other gender. Criterion A6 explains how, in boys, a strong rejection of typically masculine toys, games, and activities, and a strong avoidance of rough and tumble play. So, for example, natal boys may role play as female figures such as the mother when playing house or something in that nature, or natal girls a strong rejection of typically feminine toys, games, activities. Possibly they would play the dad in playing house. Criterion A7 explains a marked incongruence of a strong dislike of one's sexual anatomy. And lastly, Criterion A8 explains a child's desire for the primary and/or the secondary characteristics that match one's experienced gender. So, for example, to paint a picture of Criterion A7 and A8, some natal girls may express a desire to have a penis, even claim to have a penis, or that they will grow one when they're older, and sometimes they may even refuse to urinate in a sitting position. 6 of these 8 criterions, one of which must be Criterion A1, must be manifested for at least 6 months duration to give an accurate diagnosis of gender dysphoria. And Criterion B explains the condition is associated with clinically significant distress or impairment in social, school, or other important areas of functioning. So, I previously explained the criteria of gender dysphoria starts with gender dysphoria in children. So next would be the diagnosis in adolescents and adults. So to appropriately diagnose them, these manifestations, like children, these manifestations must have at least 6 months duration, but they must be manifested by at least 2 of the following criterions. Criterion A1 is a marked incongruence between one's experienced or expressed gender and primary or secondary sex characteristics between one's experienced or expressed gender. So to further clarify, in young adolescents, it would be the anticipated secondary sex characteristics because they're going through puberty. Criterion A2 is the manifestation of a strong desire to be rid of one's primary and or secondary sex characteristics because of the marked incongruence with their experienced gender. So to clarify again, young adolescents, it would be the anticipated secondary sex characteristics. But it's not always accompanied by a desire to be rid of these characteristics. So, in varying degrees, adults with gender dysphoria can just adopt the behavior and clothing and mannerisms of the experienced gender, and they can be content without seeking medical treatment to alter body characteristics. Criterion A3 explains the manifestation of a strong desire for primary and or secondary sex characteristics of the other gender. So, for an example, as one's signs of puberty develops, natal boys will sometimes bind their genitals to make erections less visible, and natal girls may bind their breasts or even wear loose sweaters to make them less visible. Criterion A4 explains another strong desire, but at this time to simply just be the other gender. And I just want to side note that it can be a desire to be of some alternative gender as well that is in fact not the opposite of their gender that they were assigned at birth. Criteria A5 explains another strong desire just to simply be treated as the other gender or alternative gender. So for example, adolescents living in, an accepting environment, they may openly express the desire to be and treated as the experienced gender, dress partly or completely as the experienced gender, have a hairstyle typical, seek friendship with peers of the other gender, and adopt a new first name consistent with the experienced gender. Criterion A6 is the manifestation of a strong conviction that one has the typical feelings and reactions of the other gender or alternative gender. And in Criterion B, like Criterion B and children's gender dysphoria, it states that the condition is associated with clinically significant distress and impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning.